anything that you learn in here is going to work generically across the human spectrum, because as human beings, we all experience the world through sensation, and everything starts with a sensation.
You're listening to Parenting with Impact, a podcast for parents like you, raising complex kids to become capable, independent adults, even in this complicated world. Each episode brings expert insights and real-life strategies to help you parent with confidence, calm, and clarity. Here are your hosts, Elaine and Diane.
Welcome back, everybody, to another conversation in the Parenting with Impact podcast. Today, my guest is Lori Crowley. We're going to talk about gender and about neurodivergence or neurospiciness, about sensory awareness. We're going to talk about important stuff. So, Lori, welcome to the show, and tell our audience how you came to be in this conversation with me today.
Yeah.
And to the work you're doing.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Elaine. I really appreciate it. It's always so wonderful to be in community with what I like to call our neurokin. So I am a LMFT, LPCC, and also a life coach, because I think it takes multiple flavors of approach for working with the folks and populations that I do. So I like to be able to kind of offer more than one way. I went back to school later in life. I have a lot of neurodivergence in my family as well as in my lived experience. And I just sort of found the supports that were available to me and to my family were just really lacking. And so I kind of went back to school to be the therapist that I always wished that we could find for our family. It's a really nice.
I just want to interrupt to say I can totally relate. And that's where I was on the path to become the therapist my family needed when I discovered coaching.
Yeah.
And got derailed from that path to this other path. So I can totally relate.
Yeah. And it's, I got really frustrated. I did the life coaching piece, and I've been a life coach since like 2003. And it works very well. And there were certain arenas that I was in, unfortunately, that I still wasn't getting the reinforcement that I felt like my clients needed. And so I was like, okay, fine, I'll just go put some more letters behind my name. It's not going to change anything, except that I'm going to have to pay a lot of money and put some stupid letters behind my name. But
well, you know what? But what you're speaking to is neuroeducation. And the need and the importance, so for you, it's blending coaching with an LPC. For me, it was neuro-informed coaching, and for Diane and me, and all of it is about elevating the education of the adults in this sphere, in this arena, to understand how neurodiversity plays in all of these other issues we're dealing with.
That's exactly it, and it's kind of the desire to change the standard of care.
Yeah.
And one way to make change is to do it from inside. So yeah, I mean, that's my ultimate life goal, is to change the standard of care as it relates to celebrating the neurodivergent lived experience. So yeah, that's kind of how I got here.
So you guys can imagine when Lori and I first met and we had this conversation and she said that, I was like, really? That's what I want to do. I'm about changing the medical model. And a colleague I worked with a few months ago said to me, you're not about changing the model. I think you're about improving the model. And so I like your language, Lori, around, changing the standard of care, really elevating and improving the standard of care.
Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the audience that you pay attention to, the community that you serve and you support, how would you describe that?
So I always say to people, anyone who is in my practice is either neurodivergent or neurodivergent-adjacent.
Mm-hmm.
So what that means, I do a lot of parenting work because I think that part of the challenge of being delivered into this broken system is that you aren't given the right frame, the right pair of glasses to understand your child. And there's a lot of re-educating or deprogramming that needs to be done. And so that is a huge part of the work that I'm doing, because what I'm hoping is that as we can help all of these families sort of view their lived experiences through this more affirming lens, that we can just totally change the dialogue, and that ways that feeds into the world is exponential. So I work with a constellation of folks that have constellation thinking, which I absolutely love. And just I don't necessarily have a fixed thing, except that you need to at least be neurodivergent adjacent, because there's tons of neurotypical folks out there that you can get support from if you're not supporting this community. So that's the only requirement to come in here.
Understood. So let's talk about that. I love that notion. I think that's very much, again, in alignment with what we do at Impact, is this notion of re-educating and deprogramming. So, I often say to parents, it took you however many years it took you to get to this point. It's going to take a little time to understand where you are and turn things around a little bit. So what is it that needs re-education? And or when does it need deprogramming? Let's look at both of those. Where do you want to start?
It's interesting, because whenever I found something that really helped our household, that really helped our system, it seemed to live in the occupational therapy world, right? It was very much about this understanding of what is happening somatically. I didn't have all those vocabulary words back then, but the more I worked with it, the more clear it became. And I knew very early on that we were dealing with an overwhelm. I just didn't understand enough about that sensory word and the sensory overwhelm that my kids were experiencing, and then how that manifested. And so that piece, that re-education piece, starts right there. I want to help you see something that you maybe have been missing. I want to draw some dots there.
And so what we're saying is we want to help families, parents, see the ways in which their kids are experiencing the world from a sensory perspective, and the challenges that the world may be posing to them from a sensory perspective, and understanding that it's not just how the kids are in the world, but it's how the world shows up for them that's part of what they're dealing with.
And this is the thing that I love about this concept, is that it feeds through. It's not just what you do with parents, it's what you do with the individual as well, right? And so I use the idea of this is like a stone in the pond, and the ripples, are going to, move out. And I always tell people, anything that you learn in here is going to work generically across the human spectrum, because as human beings, we all experience the world through sensation, and everything starts with a sensation. And so by beginning our dialogue there, and whether we're talking about if I'm working with individuals and we're talking about what's it like to be in your body, what is your experience of the world, how do you feel seen, how do you feel at ease and comfortable? And we get into all kinds of different pieces where often the gender construct and the gender idea and, getting comfort in the body, it all comes in through that door. So by starting there, right? So the first thing that we kind of do is we talk about some psychoeducation about the sensory system, talk about doing some very low-key sensory profiling, not sometimes I laugh that my first few sessions probably feel like going to an occupational therapist's office. But when we start to talk about things that, are resourcing to us, or things that cost us spoons, if we're going to use spoons theory, which I think is such a powerful, concept. And, a lot of parents are like, what is that? I don't even know. So, again, part of it is just educating the vernacular of the community. But, and again, helping people to understand what is a resource and what is that's pulling from you, right? From
A
a
drain.
spoon perspective, right? And it's funny because we talk about, say, ASMRs, right? And the huge movement of an ASMR, just for folks who don't know, is an autonomous sensory meridian response. And there's a ton of videos out in the atmosphere on ASMRs. And it's this concept that was coined in 2010 around this sensation that some people experience, and that it kind of starts with a little bit of, oftentimes like tingling, like maybe in the scalp, and kind of works down the body and leaves people with sort of a, relaxed sort of moment. And talking about the fact that when you get so dysregulated, and then if you do experience this sort of like refreshing moment, right? It was like, sometimes people have it like they'll listen to music and they'll talk about getting chills, like, ah, that is kind of what we're talking about when we talk about ASMRs. And so when we begin to understand our sensory profile, what is it like to be in the world in our body? And for a lot of my clients, their body hasn't been a safe place
Yeah.
because sensory comes in such a bombardment. And, there's some really interesting studies on the autistic brain that have come out of Solomon's lab at UC Mind Institute or UC Davis Mind Institute, and Carnegie Mellon's done some really functional MRI cool studies. But there's a higher degree of connection or connectivity through the default mode network part of the brain, which brings sensory information in an autistic brain. Wow, that makes a lot of sense why we have sensory overwhelm.
Overload.
So, yeah. So again, it's kind of, just like helping, if it's parents understand that there is a neurological piece at work here. And it isn't about choice. It isn't that my kid won't do these things. So we talk a lot about the difference between can't versus won't.
Yeah, indeed.
What does that look like? Yeah.
So let me pause you for a minute because you've brought up a number of different topics, and I want to manage our expectations and our time here. We're going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to come back and kind of lay it out and see where we can go.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Do you recognize current ADHD interventions fall short? At Dig Coaching, we have developed a new field of engineering and a new ADHD intervention called cognitive ergonomics from the inside out. To learn more, visit cognitive-ergonomics.com.
Welcome back, everybody. My guest is Lori Crowley, and we are talking about the sensory system, about ASMR, which is autonomous sensory meridian response, that way in which some people find aspects of sensory that kind of downregulate, that can calm or relax them. And to understand that people in the neurodiversity space, whether they're people on the autism spectrum or really, we haven't said this, but all kinds of different neurodiversity, have a distinct relationship with their sensory systems. And so sometimes helping people navigate neurodiversity is about helping them really understand what's happening for them on a sensory level so that we can help them learn to support themselves. You mentioned a couple of things that I want to go back to. You mentioned spoon theory, so I want to make sure we explain that for parents who may not understand what that is. I believe ADHD should be renamed something in the context of spoon theory, so I'm a big fan. But also this notion of helping our kids understand what is a resource for them and what is a drain for them, to really look at the energy regulation part of living in our bodies. That is an area of executive function that we don't think about a lot. And so to identify what's an energy resource versus what's an energy drain. And then we'll see where that takes us and what time we have left with that and where that plays in with gender. Because you've also mentioned for a lot of kids who we would call kind of gender kids, if there's a sense of disconnect in their own body, it's going to be compounded by this sensory. So explain spoon theory for starters.
So just a real quick recap of spoon theory, the way I had it described to me was like, it's like looking at the ocean and somebody gives you a spoon and tells you that you have to ladle out the ocean and you only get so many spoons each day. So this was their way of saying they felt exceedingly overwhelmed by the amount of things that they needed to do, and they were being asked to do it simply with just a spoon. But if you want to take it to kind of, moving away from this overwhelm, perspective, it's that spoons are like a measure of energy and you only get so many a day. And so, sometimes an activity might take you one spoon today. Because things are going well and, you woke up on time and the shower didn't totally repulse you and, you were able to brush your teeth or, whatever the amount of things that you needed to do. It only took me a spoon today. But, I wake up the next day and I didn't get a good night's sleep and my skin feels really prickly and now I'm going to have to take that shower and I don't want to take that shower and I have to spend all this energy to get myself into the shower. And so unfortunately, the same activity that only took me 1 spoon yesterday is going to take me 4 spoons, and I only had 6 to start with. So it's kind of this idea of trying to talk about it from there's a budget.
Right.
Oftentimes the budget does
allocation
show up.
You have a certain number of spoons every day. And as adults, I think we take for granted so many aspects of our day that we just move through that don't take that many spoons for us. But when you have kids with neurodiversity, sensory issues, all of these other things, navigating, moving through the world is like molasses and it can take, tons and tons of spoons, whereas we move effortlessly through and expect them to do the same, which may not be a realistic expectation.
Yeah. And I think it's really great to think about it from a system perspective, right? Because, as a support to an individual that is struggling, right? It might take you more spoons to support that activity or that individual. So spoons this is not unique to the neurodivergent community. Again, this is that concept of, these are great things for framing and they apply across the human spectrum of being alive.
So let's talk a little bit about the differentiation between helping our kids identify what resources them, what nourishes them, and what drains them, and how to help them navigate. Because in any given day, there are going to be things that replenish them and things that deplete. And that's what it is to get through the day. That's why we're tired at the end of every day, right?
Yeah. And that's why I really love to do this sensory profile piece. Because even within one sensation, so let's just take, sound, okay? You can be what we call sensory seeking and sensory avoidant in the same sensation. So you might have somebody that, has, every time there's an unexpected sound, or God forbid, a loud unexpected sound, that, has noise canceling headphones on all the time. That same person may have a particular sound that is very comforting to them, that is resourcing to them. So whether it's music or it's something rhythmic or again, it's trying to understand the sensory profile, and it doesn't, they have sensitive hearing. You can't, yes. And they may also have a resource inside of that sensation. So by doing a sensory profile that kind of says the basic 5, smell, taste, touch, sight, hearing. I always miss one, but I got them all this morning. And then we have 4 others that we talk about. The vestibular, which is balance, proprioception, which is where you are in space, interoception, which is such an important one because these are sensations that come from inside. And many OTs will tell you this is the key to modulation, is working on your interoception, because this is when you start to tell, I'm losing my spoons. This is when we start to see, ooh, this is too much for me, because we will begin to get internal messages that I'm getting overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And then the last one is neuroception, which is your ability to say whether or not you're safe in the environment. So we're doing a huge fire hose. I really don't know how in my neurodivergent brain to just talk about a piece because it doesn't make sense. So
No, but there is something about acknowledging the sensory experience for someone and helping them begin to learn. So it's funny, we're coming off, when we're recording this, off of a holiday where my kids were in town, and my adult kids, and we were sitting around a fire pit, and my 30-year-old said to my 24-year-old, I miss not getting dizzy anymore. And so it was this conversation, because part of navigating the vestibular system and the balance and the occupational therapy when they were little was identifying that they didn't get dizzy, and that's actually probably not the healthiest thing for them to function through the world with. But for them as children, they thought it was a superpower.
mm-hmm.
And so we're helping them navigate their sensory space in the world, but it's not always a comfortable shift for them.
No.
So will you talk about that, and let's blend that before we wrap today. Let's tie that into part of the reason that I had reached out to you originally is because I wanted somebody to talk with me about like integrating neurodiversity and kids with gender differences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I do believe that it lays on top of each other in terms of like, what is my experience of my body? What makes sense to me? What feels right? What resonates? What is causing me to be uncomfortable? Right? That this isn't just because somebody says this is the way it is, doesn't necessarily mean that is the way it is.
Or the way I want it to be for me.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, again, I'm a person that believes that I have a different definition of resilience. My definition of resilience is that you see more than one way to get through, right? And that when we get in that space of we've been dictated to, or we've been told, or this is the confine and this is the box that you have to exist inside, can cause you to totally experience the world from a traumatic standpoint because you've lost agency, you're overwhelmed, and there's this sense that you're in for imminent demise. And so that absolutely plays into our identity, how we show up in the world, how we feel comfortable, how we experience the world. So they interplay really tightly. And it doesn't surprise me that we see the amount of neuroqueer identifying individuals that we do, because the rules, the lived experience is different in this brain. And are they one-to-one correlation? Absolutely not. But there is a very high co-occurrence of neurodivergence and gender identity exploration, and it not because they don't know, but because their confines. I always see people say, neurodivergent people think out of the box. And my response is, no, they don't. There is no box.
There is no box, right?
Right. So to me, it makes total sense that would correspond to every area of being alive for a neurodivergent.
Well, and tying it back, and it also correlates to when your body doesn't feel comfortable with with how it's been identified, or with what the messages are that you get, and you're kind of already feeling a little out of sync with your body.
Yep.
It's going to have a compounding effect as well.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
So, Lori, this is so interesting, and there's so much more we could talk about. Let me tell people how they can find out about you, and then let's figure out where we want to wrap this conversation. Okay.
Yeah.
So, Lori has some resources for you to check out if you're interested in finding out more at her website, which is exptherapy.com. And there's curated resource page on neurodivergence. There's gender resources. She also does some work with the Trans Family Alliance, if that issue is relevant to you and is something you might find more about. And all of those links are going to be available in the show notes. So as we come to wrap this conversation, what have we been talking about? Like, what's the important takeaway or that you hope people leave with today? Is there something we haven't talked about that you want to mention, or is there something we have talked about that you want to kind of button up for people?
I think it's just inviting people to bring a curious mind to what it is that you're seeing in the world, in individuals, rather than thinking that you know what that is or what that is about. No matter what we're talking about, right? In the political climate that we're currently in the like classroom environment that we currently are in. I mean, just any place that you find yourself, I just really want to invite people to bring a curious mind and to really try and see what it is you're looking at. So when I look at individuals through that sensory lens, that somatic lens, I think it helps me understand how to engage so much more. Because if I look at it and I see this person is really emitting a great deal of energy, dysregulation, it's a hard word to try and put your arms around, but you can tell when somebody feels safe and can engage, and when somebody is guarded or defended or like just uncomfortable. And if you can kind of, like I said, bring that curious mind, what is going on here? What am I looking at? What is this about? And be able to engage at that level, some compassion and, bringing connection to the interaction, you're going to learn so much. And it's going to give you the opportunity to have some resilience because you're going to be able to see more than one way to engage with whatever it is you're experiencing. So
that's such a beautiful way to close this, that there's no one way forward. The way forward is to stay curious and to connect and to meet people in our families where they are and help them connect with themselves. Is really what I hear you say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is feeling safe with us, but also feeling safe with themselves.
Yeah. Well, it's that stone in the pond, drop it in and then it ripples out, and it just makes for such a richer exchange. And, it helps when you have a similar pair of glasses on because you're seeing similar things.
Yeah. Beautiful. Lori, thank you. Before we wrap, do you have a favorite quote or motto that you want to share with our community?
I do. It's ironically tattooed on my arm. It's as we seek, so shall we find. So I think it's really a powerful thing. What's my mindset? What am I bringing? What am I looking for? Because whatever I'm looking for, I'm going to find. So, yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of that whole notion of kind of be the change you want to see in the world, and the being and how we approach something. What I like to say a lot is that our perspective is our reality.
Yeah, exactly.
So, as we seek, so shall we find. That's beautiful.
Yes. But it's not mine. It's a song from a lyric from Blues Travelers. So I won't get to claim it. I don't want to say, but it really resonated with me.
All right, my friend, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting your community and our shared community in such a beautiful and soulful way.
Yeah, right back at you. It's those, coming together to fill the gap of, what we experienced, because you shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel, right?
No, indeed. So thank you for being here. To those of you listening, thank you for tuning in, for doing the work that you're doing to support yourself and your family. Take a minute to think about the conversation that Lori and I have just had. We've talked about sensory awareness. We've talked about spoon theory. We've talked about affirming, taking an affirming lens. What are you taking away from this conversation? What's the one insight, the nugget, the aha that you're taking away? And is there some way that you want to apply it in the week ahead for you? What do you want to do with what you've taken from today? And as always, my friends, thank you for doing what you do and being who you be for yourself and for your kids. It makes an extraordinary difference. And I will see you on the next conversation. Take care, everybody.
You've been listening to the Parenting with Impact podcast with Elaine and Diane. For more information on the Impact Parents community or to join Sanity School for Parents, please visit impactparents.com. If you like what you've heard, please share this podcast with friends who need similar guidance and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.